rev up your engines. Today I'm going to talk about the 5 worst things about being a mechanic. And number 1 is, you might have already guessed, you have to deal with the public. Because if you're fixing cars, you have to deal with the people who own and drive the cars. Now, I learned how to do that from my father, who was an expert in it. He ran a corner gas station. My grandfather was the chief mechanic. My father was the businessman. And he called it Kilmer's Finishing School. Now, believe it or not, I was a shy kid when I was young. And learning how to deal with the public at my father's corner gas station actually did me a whole lot of good. And I also learned how to deal with the public from my grandfather, the mechanic. I remember one time, he worked on the old Doc's car. Doc came back the next day and said, "Huh, you didn't fix my car right, I'm all mad." To which my grandfather replied, "Doc, I fix my mistakes, but you bury yours." And guess what? Doc never complained to my grandfather again, but he always came back to get his car fixed because my grandfather was a pretty good mechanic, even when he was in his 80s. Now, the next worst thing about being a mechanic is, since they keep changing how they make cars, you have to buy a whole bunch of tools to fix them with. Check inside my garage. I got tools hanging up absolutely everywhere. And if you're going to be a professional mechanic, you're going to spend a whole bunch of money on tools. Say you're working at a shop. They don't supply you with the tools. You got to bring your own tools. So there's a pretty big expense. It's not like you go somewhere and work with their stuff. You gotta buy your own tools. And with the proliferation of electronics in cars, you have to keep up with the training. You gotta train yourself, not only to use the new tools you have, but what new tools you might have to buy and what knowledge you're gonna have to put in your head to learn how to use those tools to analyze the electronic problems in new cars. I remember my grandfather mechanic telling me ages ago, to fix these modern cars, you're gonna have to be a plumber now. And this was in the 1970s. He's referring to all the vacuum lines and anti-pollution equipment that cars were starting to put on that they didn't used to have. I can imagine what he would think of modern cars. He'd say, you'd have to be a computer electronics wizard to work on cars. Now, yes, you can get a lot of training on the internet these days. That's one advantage. In his day, you had to go to a course somewhere and actually sit there physically, or you'd have to buy a book, and of course, books get outdated as soon as new stuff comes out. But with the internet, at least the training aspect of it, it's a lot easier than it used to be. Now, the next worst thing about being a mechanic is the physical battering that your body can take fixing cars. I have to admit, I'm half deaf from all the noise of fixing cars, but at least look at my hands. They're still in pretty good shape, and that's for one main reason. Years ago, my wife got me these rubber gloves. They're fantastic. They keep the grease off. They keep cuts. I even had one time that I was using a spring retainer. It slipped, and it actually split the skin off my entire finger and almost pulled it off. Yet, I didn't get an infection because the glove didn't get cut, even though my skin underneath did. These things are handy. And yeah, I got all the other aches and pains from being a mechanic for 51 years. Sometimes, my back gets really sore. And years ago, I had carpal tunnel syndrome bad. If I just picked up a gallon jug of milk, I'd have to drop it down because my wrist hurt so much. But at least the wrist, that went away decades ago when one of my customers, who was a masseuse, massaging people, he said, I had that a long time ago too, but I take this glucosamine with chondroitin pills. They claim it's a cure for arthritis, but I don't have arthritis. I had carpal tunnel syndrome. Voila, I've been taking that stuff for 2 decades now, and I don't have any pain anymore like that. So you really need to take care of yourself if you're going to be a mechanic. Now, the 5th and last worst thing about being a mechanic is being a mechanic pretty much turns you into a perfectionist. Especially if you're dealing with engine work where you're dealing with thousandths of an inch clearances, you have to do everything perfectly. So you get kind of a strange mindset, which is why many really good mechanics are rather odd people, like me. A good mechanic who's trained to be a perfectionist sees imperfections in everything. You could show me the most beautiful woman in the world and I might say, ah, her nose is a little crooked. Or a spanking brand new car, I'll say, ah, the paint's running a little over there. That piece doesn't match up more. It's got more gap on one side. Being a perfectionist does have many downsides. Now, my wife is always getting me books like this, Overcoming Perfectionism. But in my case, it might be a hopeless cause, because I'm about 3/4 German. My mother was a perfectionist. Now, my father wasn't a perfectionist at all, but my mother certainly was, and she still is. Now, in my attempt to overcome perfectionism, look at my garage. It's a gigantic mess. I deliberately leave it that way, because if I started putting it all away in neat little places, that'd be kind of weird. I'd rather just have a giant mess, and I know that, okay, the wheel tools are in this pile over here, and the electrical analysis stuff is in the pile over there. Because really, you can never let perfectionism take over your life entirely. But when you're fixing cars, your customers want you to be perfect. So you really have to work at it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.